Thanks everyone for joining us for today's panel discussion on financial literacy and capability and education in the Asia Pacific region. So my name's Anna Shaw and I'll be moderating this panel discussion today, and I'm Head of Client Insights for RFI Group. And with me on this panel, we've actually got representation from Singapore and New Zealand, which I think is going to make a really great global perspective. But with me, I have Dr. Pushpa Wood, who is the Director at the Financial Education and Research Centre at Massey University in New Zealand, and Audrey Jo Tan, who is the co-founder and chief dreams architect of PlayMoolah, which is based in Singapore. So Pushpa, I might start with you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work and what you do.
Tēnā koutou, katoa, and namaste. Greetings from what we call the land of white clouds, New Zealand. The New Zealand FinEd Centre is quite unique in itself. It's one of the, if not the only centre where you see all-inclusive financial capability work. So we have research, evaluation, consultancy, as well as we do online and face-to-face teaching and training. And then we do resource development in collaboration with various organizations as and when the need arises. So we've done considerable amount of work, for example, developing resource for people with learning disabilities, developing resources for youth at risk, to just name a few. Recently, actually last week, we've launched our first ever microcredit for specifically targeting workforce engaged in financial capability, whether delivering or whether supporting.
Thanks, Pushpa. And Audrey?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Dr. Pushpa and Anna. I'm Audrey Joy, and our vision at PlayMoolah is really building positive financial emotional resilience for a flourishing life. And so with the mission of the organization, we enable children, parents, families, young people who are entering the workforce, as well as working with corporates to bring this vision of a flourishing life. And that when we learn about money, it's in the context of finding out something that makes sense for the family, that lives and decision-making within families and within society can be purposeful and meaningful. And so for us as an organization, we've worked with educators, with educational institutions, as well as financial institutions, and we work directly with families and community organizations as well. So very thrilled to be here today to learn from all of you.
Thanks, Audrey. And I think both Pushpa and Audrey are doing really interesting things both in Singapore and New Zealand. And I think I'm really hoping that there's going to be quite a different perspective and different conversation compared to some of the other sessions that we'll have as part of the conference today. So it's a topic I'm particularly excited about as well: financial literacy, financial inclusion. And I think to start off the conversation today, we were speaking a little bit offline about the difference between financial literacy and financial capability. And Pushpa, this was an area you mentioned that in New Zealand, the terminology is less so financial literacy, and these days it's more so around financial capability. Are you able to talk us through the differences there a little bit and the strategy behind financial capability being that focus?
I'll give you a layperson's view in terms of literacy and capability. Yes, that's true. In New Zealand, we are now more and more using the term financial capability and also venturing into the term financial well-being. Now, to me, financial well-being is the outcome of financial literacy and financial capability. So if you have got financial literacy and capability, you are likely to move towards financial well-being. That's my vision and my understanding. The way I differentiate between literacy and capability is that literacy provides you knowledge, it provides you skill set. So it's a collection of skill set for any particular subject area that you actually are looking at. So in this case, it's the skill set that helps you to make financial decisions, whether they are your financial decisions related to your work or whether they are financial decisions related to your personal life. Capability goes deeper than that. Capability provides you with the sense of confidence and the sense of purpose and ability to actually make those decisions that are not only going to impact on your life now, but also in the long term, right? And leading to that financial well-being, that sense of security that you need. It also takes into account your background, your psychological factors that play, your cultural background that plays a role in how you make financial decisions. So it takes you deeper than just understanding managing your finances. Is why you make certain decisions and how you make certain decisions, and how can you change your behavior towards money, your attitude towards money. That's in a nutshell.
No, that's a great summary. And I think, I mean, it'd be good to know, Audrey, in Singapore, is it financial literacy that you're focusing on, or is it also similar where it's more of a well-being and capability focus?
Yeah, so our work has really culminated in what we call financial emotional resilience. And we define it really as the ability to change, adapt, and to modify your emotions, as well as your daily practices and actions in the context of your financial decisions. The reason why we've come to this space is recognizing and realizing that with money, our emotions play such a big component. And actually, very similar with financial capability, financial emotional resilience is an outcome. So having then learned the skills of emotional regulation, of mindful decision making, we also have a pathway that we take the learner through the process. We realize that at the very heart of it, the context is that we're teaching the person and not so much teaching the subject. And so when we put the person at the center of the education and the learning, then it's about figuring out, okay, what is this young person feeling when it comes to money? What are the emotions that are associated with it? And how do we actually regulate, moderate, and alter that in the context of decision making? So for us, when we look at financial well-being, we see it very holistically. Also with another dimension in permaculture that we've learned called the 8 forms of capital. So it's not just financial, intellectual, social capital, but we're looking at also experiential capital, which is the wisdom you've gained through life, right? Cultural capital, spiritual capital, living capital. And when we see it holistically as well, and even your emotional capital, you begin to rethink money in this context that financial, social, intellectual is not the end all and be all of the measure of wealth and success. So it's to reframe, how our financial emotional resilience can help us to go one step further in the flourishing life that we define for ourselves.
I think it's important to remember that we cannot really teach people about money in isolation. And that's the one of the biggest challenge we have been having in past, is that we've been teaching money in isolation as a separate subject. In literacy term, we call it, we have been using bolted on approach rather than built-in approach. And to me, the built-in approach from all different parameters of your life is really, really important. And we still, internationally, we still do not know enough about the impact of culture on people's financial decision making. And that's a piece of work separately we've been doing for the last 3-4 years, trying to understand the impact of culture on that.
I think that's such an important distinction as well when thinking about the fact that financial resilience and capability and how you think about money doesn't occur in isolation. And there's all these other factors that actually play a part. And I like this idea, Audrey, that if you can keep people at the center and then you're thinking about what do people specifically need rather than here is the strategy, let's apply it and see what happens, because everyone is so different. And you mentioned young people as well being quite important as a focus. And I think something that is, money, even the way you think about it, there's that culture point that you make, Pushpa, as well as the fact that, what are you being taught by parents or in school, or how do you feel about money? Why is that? And it's such a complex area that doesn't really have a one size fits all solution.
Never has been. And I don't think it ever will be.
Yeah, exactly. It would continue to change.
We continue to, exactly.
Yeah.
Every individual, even through and that's why some of the countries use life stage approach when it comes to money. So your needs change according to what stage of life you're in. So it's quite a complex area when you talk about money. The influencing factors are hitting you from all around.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the life stages you mentioned is also quite key, because what you're thinking about in terms of money when you're maybe 20 to 30 is one thing, but when you start having kids or you're thinking about aging parents or whatever it might be, suddenly there's all these different needs and different perspectives as well.
Exactly. And that's what capability provides you, the ability to actually measure your needs as you move forward.
Yeah, I really like that idea. I think it'd be good to understand a little bit more about the work you're both doing in your respective markets and how you're really targeting and addressing financial capability. Pushpa, I might start with you on that topic.
For the FIRESIDE Center, majority of our work has been with different sectors as and when the needs have arisen. For example, about 5-6 years ago, we were approached by at-risk youth groups, the youth services, and they said, we are supposed to provide them budgeting advice. That was the term was used, but it is we are externally sourcing it because we do not have the ability or capability to actually teach them in-house. So would you be able to prepare some resources for us and train us? And like as Audrey said, for me, it wasn't important who was going to teach them, how they were going to teach them. What was more important for me to understand was, what is it that the young people that's supposed to be our target audience, what do they actually want to know? What are their needs and how would they like to learn best? And what will be their ideal situation? And based on some of those focus groups, we then developed a tailored resource for them. So we do, some of the work we do is we work with other organizations, we try and understand their needs and then work with them rather than work for them. So most of the resources we've developed are all jointly shared. So they use with their groups, and whenever we need to use it, we use with our group. So we've developed specific resources for Maori audience, for example. We've done some overseas consultancy work, same thing as working with the organization, developed resources, trained them, and then walk out, because then it is their responsibility. So we always go in any consultancy work, we go in with the exit strategy, always. The other work we're doing, and which last few years has become my focus personally, is to actually lift the standard of people who are delivering financial capability or who are supporting financial capability. So whether they're budget advisors or financial advisors or whatever sector of financial capability they're coming from. As a result, we developed the competency framework. And now we are in the process of developing a self-assessment tool. So anybody who is in the financial capability sector or want to enter the financial capability sector, they will be able to assess themselves to say, where are they sitting on that capability framework, and therefore develop their own pathway to move forward in the workforce, but also creating a pathway of progression for them. Because one of the challenge we found in our budgeting services, majority of our financial or budget advisors are 50 plus, retired, some of them. Majority were, it's changing now, but were European middle class. But their target audience was Maori, Pacifica, refugees, migrants, ethnic communities. So it was quite an interesting kind of a mismatch in some ways. So we were looking at what are the, and I've been sort of puzzling over it, what can we do to A, attract young people, and B, to retain them? Because young people have a high mobility in their career path. And hence, we've now developed the what we call the workforce development plan hand. That's what at the moment I've been working with in collaboration with FinCap and our Ministry of Social Development. So to attract young people, we need to actually create a learning pathway for them, but also a working pathway for them as well. So that's another exciting piece of work we are doing right as we speak.
Yeah,
I'll stop here and I can always come back in if there's anything else particularly.
I think, yeah, I'm sure we'll get to talk more about what you're doing in this space, but I think this focus on young people is really interesting and really targeted. And I think, Audrey, this probably relates a little bit with your work as well, because I know you do have a focus on young people, and you're currently in a very busy week at the moment, even doing a run of programs as well. So could you talk us through a little bit about your strategy and the focus as well?
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, Dr. Pushpa, you spoke about so many things that, has really lit up light bulbs in my mind. And the first is in relation to young people. We actually have, as a group of educators, develop a pathway for young people. We take them through a 4-stage process, the pathway of a flourishing life. The first is inspiring through stories. So getting a young person to hear the stories of the community and people within the space. The second is narrative. So looking at our Moolah narratives, right? What are the narratives and the stories we've grown up with money? And I think Dr. Pushpa mentioned this very accurately about the cultural influences. And going very specifically into this area, one of the things that we've done in our programs is really getting young people to uncover the narratives, the stories that they've been told by their family, their grandparents, their ancestors, the people that have gone before them. And sometimes, when it comes to narratives, we see the lack of role modeling or role modeling within our families, where we see families fighting about money. And that's the imprint that we have in our minds. And so we get young people actually to go through their process of uncovering the old narratives, to rewrite some of these scripts, to have more enabling beliefs, as opposed to having, like, say, limiting beliefs. And then we go through the process of what we call Moolah goals. So this is where the technical aspects of money come in, right? Budgeting, habits of mind, learning about moderation, learning about how to invest as well. And then finally, with Moolah Wellbeing, this is a new program that we've also launched with young people, in that we see if a young person needs to go through specific therapy or counseling based on the money traumas that they've had before, or even in their own family context. This is where a young person has the full pathway and the opportunity to go through that if they so decide to. So in a sense, we see that, this pathway gives a young person opportunities to come in at different times. And what we've done also is that we've really co-created this with young people, listening very closely on the ground, because I think one of the biggest gaps we find here in Singapore in this time is really what we call like money anxiety. And I think in 2019, there was a study that was done by BlackRock. Here in Singapore, they cited that more than 53% of Singaporeans saw money as a big source of stress, and more so even for the millennial generation. And so with this stress with money and, emotional regulation and even like anxiety around money, we realized that there is a lot of work that needs to be done there to address some of these gaps.
I think the situation about money anxiety is very similar in New Zealand as well, and I suspect would be similar in Australia too. I think the other challenge we have, those of us who are in the financial capability area, is the invisibility of money. And that has been our biggest challenge when it comes to dealing with school-aged children. There are children now in the school, in primary schools, who have not seen beyond $10 note in New Zealand, for example. Their perception of money is a plastic card and a machine. Those are the two links that they have. So their attachment to money is very different to my generation or even your generation. So we're talking about at the moment 3 generations in circulation in the world who are actually perceiving money in 3 different ways and have a relationship with money in 3 different ways. And hence what our attempt has been at the FinEd Center is trying to equip and prepare the workforce that is working with these young people, is how will they actually work with this young generation coming up? Because there is nothing worse than a 50-year-old trying to tell a 10-year-old how to manage their money. The association is not there. And yet we do find that majority of the workforce that is teaching about money is not necessarily young. And hence our focus on trying to attract the young workforce by providing them that development framework would be really quite a useful tool. We do have a very good and well-structured schools program in schools, which is our Commission for Financial Capability actually has been working really hard for the last few years. But the jury is still out at the moment because it is still new. We still do not know. It hasn't been long enough to know whether it is making the impact where it needs to be. All right. I mean, the reality is when you offer any program, there will be hardly, the program has to be absolutely pathetic for somebody to not learn something. Right? So they will learn something, but whether that something is the one that they needed to learn, wanted to learn, and is going to be useful for them in their future is the key thing.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting point as well about where the message is coming from and who's doing the teaching, because you're right, if it's a 10-year-old especially, you know, their experience of money is extremely different to someone who's 50, because even the way they were paying for things, or their parents are paying for things, or the way that the family household budgeted money would be very different. And
Exactly.
I guess the hard thing would be getting young people into those positions to actually be teaching, who are a little bit more aligned with the younger generations, who can actually sort of better understand how to tailor that messaging for a really young child compared to someone who's 30 or 50 or, you know, older than that.
Exactly. And I think hence lies the challenge. If I have my wish, I would actually set up money clubs in every primary and every secondary school. And I will actually start to really work through with these young people to become champions in their own right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's very, very pertinent as well, because we found that what has worked for us in Singapore with PlayMoolah is actually working with the Entrepreneurship and Investing Club, the junior colleges and in the schools. And we realized that the resonance of these young people have a sense of like agency, you know, they're into entrepreneurship and into financial education and investing. So we had an opportunity to work with a group of students as well. And their vision was to go in to teach their own peers. And I think that's exactly the model that we're seeing. Yeah.
No, that's true.
It must be really exciting seeing all that come together as well, and just seeing people who are excited about the prospect of teaching and learning and investing and finding new ways of managing their money as well.
I think we also, other thing we need to do is to, that's in my view, in observation of number of years, is we really need to change our discourse as well. We need to change our language, because with young people, if we can avoid the terminology teaching and start using term sharing experiences, is more palatable rather than I'm going to teach you something about money. The second thing is the term retirement turns young people off. I mean, the young people's horizon is very small. You know, 10, 15, even an 18-year-old doesn't really want you to tell them all about, you know, what's waiting ahead at the age of 65. What they do want to know is, how can I take charge of my life? Right? At every stage. How can I take charge of my life when I get out of high school? How can I take charge of my life when I'm in employment? How can I take charge of my life at different stages? And if that's the kind of discussion we start to have, and within that, then of course the retirement comes and emergency saving comes and all sorts of topics come in there. But it's just trying to find that right language which is understandable by people, rather than being sort of caught up with the jargon that is being used internationally.
I really like that idea about taking charge. And I think that sort of resonates as well with what you were saying about financial capability rather than literacy, because financial literacy is one thing, you understand to an extent, your financial products or how you can manage money, but being capable and having the capability to actually be, empowered in your decision making and actually be thinking about the future. Because I think particularly in Australia, we have superannuation, which is compulsory, yet we see young people really don't appreciate it. They don't like it. There was opportunity last year with the pandemic to actually withdraw up to 10,000 from your superannuation. And so many people did it, and they did things like paying off debts, but some people even withdrew money for gambling. It was just this disconnect between the impact of withdrawing that money, because it's too hard to see yourself at 60 or 65 or 70. And I think that disconnect is something that really needs to be addressed here as well. And I imagine that's similar in other markets as well, where while it may be people don't enjoy thinking about the future, there's a lot of benefit to actually just thinking, how can I set myself up for the future and how can I take charge? Like you said, Pushpa, I like that idea of taking charge.
Yeah, that's why one of the courses we developed a couple of years ago, an online short course for all our first year students. When they enter university, it sits on their registration, their enrollment page, and it's making your money work for you. All right, and that's the title of the course, and that sits there whole year for them to move in and out of that. But the other interesting thing we've noticed through our longitudinal study, which we started in 2012, that till now it still remains, parents still remain the first port of call for young people for financial advice. Right? Any money related issues, they go to parents first. Yet we are not putting internationally and collectively, we're not putting enough effort in actually educating or making parents, A, financially capable themselves, and B, how they can then pass on that information to their children. Because I very strongly believe that any education, including about money, begins first at home. It starts at the dining table, it gets reconfirmed in school, and it gets reconfirmed again in your tertiary environment, gets reconfirmed and added in. So as you move through your stages, you keep picking up new things.
And Audrey, does that tie in with your work a little bit, thinking about the role of parents in educating kids, but also in teaching kids as well?
Very much. And see, that was really one of the big reasons for starting PlayMoolah almost a decade ago, recognizing as young people at that time entering the workforce that we were not taught a lot about money. That was the key thing, right? And we were stuck in the middle of the global financial crisis with all these jargons about debt and the GFC, etc., and realizing that, yeah, actually, even when I went through school, I didn't learn very much. Actually, I probably didn't learn anything about money. And, I went in with a thesis thinking that we were educating children and young people, but very quickly realizing through our work that actually the heart of it is educating, passing on the knowledge and the learnings to parents. And there's a saying, right? You can't give what you don't have. And oftentimes, a lot of our previous generation, they themselves haven't learned about money. So in my own context, my parents taught me to save. And in Singapore, we save and we have like multiple saving accounts, right? But it stops there. It doesn't go to in-depth budgeting, it doesn't go into investing. So as a young person, I realized that there was a lot of agency and self-directed learning that needed to happen. And then realizing that actually many of us young people actually went through the same thing, that our parents didn't have necessarily the skills or the role modeling for that matter to show us these good role modeling around money. So a big part of our work today is really also about learning together with the parents. And a lot of times, we have parents who come with us through the webinars, the talks, and we try to think of the interventions that we are developing from a family standpoint. So if we're educating the children and the youth, we're thinking, okay, what would be then meaningful to trigger money conversations among parents and children as well. So I think there's a lot in there that needs to be done. And I really like what Dr. Pushpa is saying also about, capability for the educators. I think that's also a very big part that we're seeing, because in Singapore as well. So I think the model that we have in the work that we're doing, collectively, realizing also that as a person who's training parents, for instance, some of the parents are educators too in the schools teaching younger children, right? So the role of an educator is also a parent, right? Or like a grandparent, taking on different roles in the world, in society. And so I realized that there's also a very cyclical approach in this work that we're doing. That actually we're teaching the same person, but just perhaps in different roles.
Yeah, exactly. In some of my pro bono community work I do, I run the workshops. One of the most popular one is, how do I say no to my teenager without feeling guilty?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I have a lot of fun when I work with parents of teenagers, The other piece of work I always enjoy is writing about, how to teach your children about money. So 0 to 5, 6 to 10, all of those kind of things. So when it comes down to, if you take away all of the layers, bottom line is the common sense. And that common sense, I still remember in childhood being taught, if you don't have it, you can't spend it. That was just one simple rule. The second rule I was taught by my grandparents, if you have one piece of bread, make sure you put half away for tomorrow, unless you're 100% sure there will be another piece tomorrow. So if you're uncertain, you must save that. So most Asian countries, they are very, I guess they teach their children about saving for tomorrow, but not necessarily budgeting skills, not necessarily investing. It's becoming popular. And investing seems to be, once you have your own money, once you start to earn your own money, that's where investing comes into fore. But now I notice in a country like India, for example, I go there every year, there's a heavy focus on investing, and children in schools are learning about investments. So the things are changing gradually, but whether they're changing for better or for worse, we don't know yet.
Something we've spoken about was the gaps in financial literacy, and we've mentioned that there's a real need to be educating parents. And I think something else that relates to this that I'd be interested to learn a bit more from both of you about is RFI group data does show that women are less likely than men to be indicating high levels of understanding when it comes to banking and finances. So thinking about this when we're talking about financial literacy, or capability might be the better way of wording it, what do you both think can be done to actually improve that financial capability for women in sort of all of our markets? Pushpa, I might start with you.
I was hoping you'll start with Audrey this time. Women, I think there are two issues there. One is women are known to underestimate their knowledge and their ability, not only in financial field, but in almost every field. Right. Whereas men are known to overestimate, and that comes with sense of confidence. Right. So at the heart of it is lack of confidence among women about their own ability to manage money. To me, that's my understanding. And yes, because of that reason, there is a gap. There are some cultural factors that also play the role. If you haven't been ever given an opportunity in your life to manage money, you're going to learn less about money. If you're not in dealing with the financial products and services on day-to-day basis, your knowledge base will be lower. So yes, women do lack. And statistically, in reality, it may be slightly different. But to me, the key thing needs to happen when it comes to women is to try and understand what are their fears and what are their hesitations and what are the barriers that are actually preventing them from taking an active part in saving and investing. And we have a number of those kind of programs here where the investing for women, for example, is becoming now quite a popular topic for running workshops in that. But I think the key thing is A, we need to understand the barriers, and B, then we need to remove those barriers and see we need to put some programs in place that are in consultation with women, not for women, right? Because majority of the understanding at the moment, the programs are developed for women by investors, right? Or by bankers, or by regulators, right? And it would be really quite nice to turn it around and let women actually start to work and decide what they want to learn, how they want to learn, where they want to learn, and then bring in the experts to actually get to do a going over, I would say, the quality assurance role.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And Dr. Pushpa is spot on when it comes to getting our users to co-design the intervention or the outcome. And we've seen that a lot in our work as well. And I mean, talking a little bit about one of the factors that we found, it really goes back also to the history of money and then money narratives that women grow up with. Oftentimes in our work, what we've seen with women also is that they haven't had very strong role modeling, and money had always been a source of big conflict within the family. And so there is a tendency to avoid. And once you avoid looking at your bank account, having the money conversation, leaving it to the husband to do it instead, we realize that's where that sense of dissonance happens emotionally, mentally, and even physically when it comes to a woman's relationship with money. And so as we were thinking about this and doing this work, I was speaking with my teammate, and Jerry, who's an educator on our team, you know, she said something really beautiful. She said that perhaps what's needed is also to find ways in which we can use language that we as women understand and that we as women have. And women are compassionate and we care about the sustainability of the community, the environment, and businesses. And oftentimes we're looking at sustainable businesses that actually impact the community, the family, the children, you know, the wider community as well. So I feel also that there is a great opportunity to take a community approach, because I think what we found in our work also is that when we bring women in to start investing together as a community and have those community conversations in a safe space, we realize that women actually start investing. And we've seen that with some of the work that we've done as well. And building the confidence through small steps, you know, like daily small practices.
See, Asian countries, and especially in Southeast Asia, there are some fantastic examples of how small communities and small women's group actually save and invest in their own ways. And in Western world, when we develop the program even for women, our focus is women in the workforce on a good income, right? Have the resources to actually save. We forget that there is a high percentage of women who are not necessarily in employment, but are dealing with money, are managing money on day-to-day basis, and therefore the programs need to have that balance between the two, and that I find it is still not there yet. I mean, the work has been going on, but it's not there yet. And that's where the biggest worry I have is when we are developing for, we identified the gap, women are not investing, let's develop a program for women and teach them all about investment, the rules and regulations of investment, and take away their risk, fear, right? So the focus is on that area rather than seeing where are they actually coming from? What is their own understanding of investment? And investment does not necessarily mean money, right? And the bank account. Investment for one family can mean all the resources pulled together, and the sole young person, the son or the daughter, has to go through the higher education. So all the resources pulled together to send that person, that child, to achieve the best possible outcomes. And that is the biggest investment for them. Right? Same as in Pacific community. It's not the cash that is seen as investment. So we need to understand how different cultures actually perceive money, not the Western lenses of money.
Absolutely.
Definitely. And I think, as you mentioned, the really key, I think something that's really important as part of this is actually consulting with the groups that it's impacted. So speaking to different different communities and women and migrants and people with different cultures to understand, you know, where are they learning about money? Who do they speak to about money? How does culture play a role? Is it a sharing culture? Is it a individual culture? How does that all work? And how can that also maybe be a barrier, or how can it be something that can actually just be worked with to get the outcome that we're looking for? But I think it's definitely something, as you mentioned, Pushpa, it's not going to get easier because times change, people change, the generations will change, the way we use money changes as well. So I think that's it's going to be a continuous process, but I think the work you're both doing also is really helping in this space. And I think there's collectively so much knowledge, even just with you two here today. And then if you imagine other organizations as well, I think it's really exciting thinking about the future. And I think that ties in with my final question for this session, which is really looking at what are the goals that you have for the next 12 months or even longer term to really help with financial capability in your markets. Audrey, I might start with you on this one.
Sure. So for us, the three key segments that we are very kind of devoted also, the first is working with families. So this work actually continues because we're working already today with a lot of educational institutions, but to supplement the learning above and beyond what happens in the school, we're working very closely with kids and parents. So our goal is really to work in a sense of designing more interventions such that the families can actually come together. So that's the first. The second for us is in terms of the goals in reaching out to young people, we envisage also working out very closely with corporates and organizations that actually have graduating students as well as the young jobbers to prepare them actually for the next stage in their life. So these are the two key things. And I think thirdly as well, we're also seeing that as part of a flourishing life, there's also the opportunities for flourishing companies. So the vision that I've seen is, you know, if you have flourishing individuals, flourishing families, that goes into flourishing organizations, that's where we have a system that we've developed in place to essentially manage the emotional regulations and the stresses around money to increase productivity and to reduce the money anxieties in the workplace. So that's something that we're also seeing as part of our vision of a flourishing life to do more of in the next 12 months.
Thanks so much. And Pushpa?
Well, our vision, and especially my personal vision, is that every child, when they leave their high school, they know what money is, what it is used for, how it is used, and how best they can take charge of that money. I would love to see literacy, numeracy, and financial literacy as the basic human right. Every child has a right to know that. Going beyond that, then my vision is that everybody who wants to learn about money has access to resources that are accessible to them culturally, socially, educationally, in every form and shape. They are taught by professional people who know what they're talking about. And above all, they have the ability and access to information and knowledge that is going to help them to take charge of their life at every stage. So it's a big vision, but it will happen.
Absolutely, especially with amazing women like both of you in charge and you're providing these and educating so many families and individuals. I think it's a really exciting space, and I know I'll be keeping an eye on both of the work that you're doing. So thank you so much for your time. I know this would have been really interesting and a little bit different for our listeners and for anyone who's watching this session today. So I can't thank you both enough.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It has been a pleasure.
Thank you, Anna.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Pushpa.
Thanks, Audrey. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you.